Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my November wrap-up. So I think that November was the month that I've read like the most ever in my life. Not in the terms of the number of books, but in terms of the amount of pages, because I've read 5,552 pages. And that was only 11 books, but I guess that the fact that I'm 700 pages into this book definitely contributed to that, but this is obviously not gonna be in the wrap-up because I haven't finished it. Anyway, let's get into what I did read. And the first book I read was called Follow Me to Ground, and this was a horror novella. And in this book, we followed Ada and her dad, and they were honestly, like, I don't think we ever learned exactly what they were, but they weren't human. They were some other creatures, and they had some abilities that allow them to basically heal, cure, whatever, humans. And also, like, they lived for a very, very, very long time, like several generations of humans passed and they continue there. And so the humans of the town they lived in basically went to their house whenever they were sick. And at some point, Ada started hanging out with a human that her dad didn't really approve of, didn't really like. And honestly, like, I get that because I didn't like him either. And we also got a lot of chapters that were like other people talking about them, like what they thought about Ada and her dad. And we also got like a lot of chapters just describing cures, and I just kept waiting for like the wow moment, but I never really got it. And so, yeah, I wasn't really like invested in the plot. I wasn't really liking the characters either, and I was just not interested in general with the story. And like the reveal at the end, I saw it coming like from the beginning of the book basically, so that was also not surprising. And also, like, I was not scared or like uncomfortable or like anything I want to be when I'm reading a horror book. So yeah, that didn't really work either. And I mean, the last third was a bit better, like a little more exciting, but still didn't really, enjoy my time reading it. And so I gave it 2 stars. Okay, next I read You've Lost a Lot of Blood by Eric LaRocca. And this book, like, I decided to read this book because last year I read, this was also a horror novella. And last year I read another horror novella by this author, which was called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. And that was the most disturbing book I've ever read in my life. Like, it continues to be the most disturbing book I've read in my life. And so, I wanted more of it. And in this book, we followed many different things, but we were following kind of like an author that was a psychopath. And in the book, we had like a novella written by that author and some poems also written by that author. And we also had some transcripts of a conversation of that author and his boyfriend. And yeah, like, there was a lot going on and none of it really like connected with the other things. And it was really weird. And like within the novella, I guessed half of like the reveal, but the other half that I didn't guess, like, mind blown. And it was definitely weird. It was definitely disturbing. It was definitely fun. And for me, like, personally, it's always fun to read from like a psychopath's point of view. So I actually had a lot of fun with this book, and I'm not gonna explain anything else because it's just better to go into this book like knowing nothing, which was what I did. And I still like the other one more. Like, it was still like way more disturbing, but still had a lot of fun with this one, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read The Tower of the Swallow, which is the 4th novel in the Witcher series. And that's a fantasy series, if you don't know, which you probably do because of the TV show. But yeah, so I'm obviously not gonna get into the plot because it's the 4th novel, and like the 6th book overall. And This was like very much series book because we started with her, we finished with her, and she was still directly or indirectly connected to, I would say, every single chapter. So yeah, this was very much her book, and she is definitely not my favorite character, neither in the TV show nor in the books, but actually I like her more in the show. In the books I never really, like, I don't dislike her, but I just don't like her. I didn't feel any connection with her before. But in this book, I actually started liking her a lot more. And yeah, now I actually do really like Ciri. But like my favorite chapters were still the ones where we followed Geralt and Jaskier and their group of people. So yeah, that did not change. But like I said, not gonna get into any details, obviously, but I actually had a lot of fun. And there were some awesome fight scenes as usual. I started liking Ciri, like really liking her, so that was great as well. And there was like one thing that made me pretty sad in this book, but apart from that, I had a great time, and I also gave this one 4 stars. Then we have 3 books, and they are Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest, which is the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings series, and that is a fantasy series, so obviously this is also fantasy. And we follow Fitz, and he is the bastard son of the heir to the throne. And we start following him when he's 6, and he doesn't really remember anything from before. And he is taken by some people, like from, like, I guess guards. They were guards? I don't remember exactly. But basically, he is taken to Buckkeep, which is where the royal family is. I mean, not his dad, but like the king and other royal people. And so he's taken there, and one of his dad's men starts like taking care of him. And one day he meets the king, and the king tells him basically that, he could use his services, and basically starts being trained to be an assassin. And I definitely loved Fitz from the beginning. Also loved the world building in this series. Loved a lot of characters as well. But I feel like in the middle of the first book, it kind of like got very slow, and I lost a little bit of my interest, but still enjoyed it, and it was still like a great beginning to the series, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then the second book, it was definitely like not fast-paced either, but I guess I was more invested in the story, and the last third was intense, insane, just wow, and I absolutely loved it, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. And the third one, I felt mostly the same as with the second, except that the end wasn't that exciting, like not as intense as the second book. What the hell is happening? Was not as intense as the second book, so I didn't like love it as much. And I feel like this book as well was so sad, like all of it. Like the beginning was sad, the ending was devastating, but yeah, I still thought it was great, and I gave it 4 stars. And if you wanna hear more thoughts about it, like with spoilers, me saying everything I think about them, I have reading vlogs for these 3 books that I will link in the description, and I will also link the playlist up there. Moving on, the next 5 books, and the last 5 books I read were actually all like anticipated releases. And you would think that if I anticipated them, I would read them like as soon as they came out. But the thing is, I was really excited to read them when I learned that they were gonna come out, but then like more books got in the way, and I'm only reading them now, and I still have 1 to go. But anyway, the next book I read was called The Book of Cold Cases, and this was a mystery thriller, also kind of with a horror element to it. And in this book, we followed Shia, and she was a receptionist, I think. She worked at a clinic. I want to say that she was a receptionist, but I might be wrong. That was her day job. And at night, she worked on her blog, true crime blog, where she just talked about various crimes. And one of the crimes she talked about was actually from like kind of her hometown. And that was a crime that took place 40 years before, where two men were murdered. And the suspect, like the only suspect, was a woman named Beth. But she wasn't convicted. There wasn't like enough evidence linking to her, and so she was free. And one day, Shia finds Beth and asks her for an interview, and Beth agrees. And they start the interview at Beth's house, and there is something weird going on in that house. Honestly, like, in the first half of the book, we didn't really get any progress. Like, Shia was talking to Beth, but they weren't really getting anywhere. We weren't getting any answers, like, nothing. And then, in the second half, like, right as part 2 began, we got, like, answers, but in a very straightforward, like, this is what happened kind of way, and that was not my favorite kind of reveal. And so I didn't really love the mystery part of it. The horror I also didn't really like. I wasn't scared. Again, like, I wasn't uncomfortable, I wasn't scared, I wasn't anything. Like, I didn't feel anything for most of the book. I was just kind of bored, which is not what you want in a thriller. I mean, it's not what you want in any book, but it's a thriller. It's supposed to be thrilling. And I was just bored. But I do have to say that I like Beth's chapters, like, from the past way more, which is not surprising because when there is a dual timeline, I will always, or almost always, like the timeline from the past better. So that was not surprising at all. And honestly, like, when we left those chapters from the past and got back to the present, like back to Shia, I was like, oh yeah, she exists. She's the main character in this book. I kind of forgot about her. So yeah, that's how I was going. And the last 100 pages, or maybe a little less than 100, were better. Like, things were more exciting, more things were happening, but still didn't really love it. And I gave it 2.5 stars. Next, I read The City of Dusk, which is the first book in the Dark Gods series, and that's a fantasy series. And in this book, we followed 4 families. I mean, we followed 4 characters from 4 different families. I mean, that's a lie, actually. We followed a 5th character. But anyway, let's focus on the 4 families. There were 4 families who were descendants from 4 gods. And so each one of those families had the power of one god. And so we had the Mordovas, who had the power of life, which means that basically they could control the elements. And the character we followed from the Mordovas was Angela. Then we had the Seers, who had the power of light. And from the Seers, we followed Nick. Then we had the Vakaras, who had the power of death, so like necromancy and stuff. And we followed Risha. And last but definitely not least, because she was my favorite, we followed the Last Readers, who had the power of darkness, shadow, whatever, and we followed Tay. And so basically, they, like, their gods had ceased communication with them and kind of like closed off their realm. And so the realm, the kingdom, whatever, was dying. And so they were trying to find a way to save their home, their kingdom. And at the same time, they were also trying to gain the king's favor because the king isn't part of any of those families. He didn't have any powers, and he also didn't have any heirs. So like, one of them would be the king's successor. So they were trying to both save their home and also have the king's favor, but maybe it was impossible to do those 2 things. And I had a lot of fun with this book. There was like a plot twist around halfway through the book that I did not see coming. There were some really great fight scenes as well. And yeah, I was just very invested in the plot. And I saw some people complaining about the pacing of the book, but I didn't mind, actually. I didn't think it was slow like some people were saying. And the characters, like Tay, I always liked her from beginning to end. She was always my favorite. But the others, like, some of them I started liking and then I didn't like and then I liked them again, and some I didn't like and liked and didn't like, and just a roller coaster. And I'm still unsure about some of them. But overall, I had a lot of fun with this book and I gave it 4.5 stars. Right, next I read Portrait of a Thief, which was a contemporary kind of thriller. And in this book, we followed 5 Chinese American college-aged people. Some of them were in college, some weren't. But basically we followed mainly Will. He was the main character, even though like we had chapters from everyone's point of view, but Will was the main character. And he was basically like, there was a heist that he took advantage of, because while the people from the heist were stealing things, he also swiped something, and the others noticed him, and then they contacted him to do another heist, because basically they wanted him to get some pieces of art that were stolen from China and were now in museums across Europe and also one in the United States. And they wanted him to retrieve those pieces of art and take them back to China. And so Will assembled a team, and he was basically the leader. Then we had his sister Irene, who was the con artist. We had Daniel, who was the more expert thief. We had Lily, the getaway driver, and Alex, the hacker. And I have very mixed feelings about this book, because I really like the characters. I really liked like learning about them, learning about their story, learning about their families, just seeing them interact with each other, seeing them planning things. I really liked like all of that. I really liked following them. But then the heists themselves were kind of disappointing, and there wasn't really a lot about the heists. And I don't know, I was just expecting a more like fast-paced book. And also like overall the writing, I liked it, but I just had some issues with it. There were some like sentences or just expressions that were repeated a lot, and like enough to be noticeable to like pull me out of the story, and that kind of bothered me. But like I said, I have mixed feelings about it, but overall I did enjoy it, because this was mostly about the characters and not about the heist. And since I really like the characters, I mostly like the book, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Next book I read was called Hotel Magnifique, and this was a fantasy mystery. And in this book there was a hotel, obviously, that was sort of magical, and it appeared in a new place every morning. And also like magic was, in that world, magic is dangerous, because people who have magic can't really control it. But inside the hotel, magic is allowed and it's safe, and no one really knows why or how, but people just know that inside the hotel, magic is safe. And so we follow Jenny, and she dreams of getting a job at the hotel because she wants a better life for herself and her little sister Zoza. So she takes her sister and herself to the hotel for like a job interview. And after some initial problems, they managed to get in the hotel and they managed to work there. And after Jenny notices some strange behavior from other employees, she realizes that there is something very strange about their contracts. And so she basically has to figure out what is wrong and try to fix it. And honestly, didn't love this book. I didn't love the main character either. Didn't love the romance. And at first I thought it was just me, because I'm not like a romance person. I'm not a romance reader. But then I saw that I wasn't the only one who thought that like there was no real chemistry between the two people of the relationship. And I was also not invested in the plot. Things were happening, but I was still kind of bored. I was not interested. And so I think that, maybe it just wasn't the book for me, because like I said, things were happening. And like, it wasn't even like atmospheric enough, because I mean, like, it was magical and whatever, but it wasn't atmospheric enough to, just be there for the atmosphere. Because especially in some horror books, sometimes there isn't really anything happening, but like it's really creepy. The atmosphere is creepy, it's unsettling, and I'm just, there for the vibes. But in this case, the vibes weren't enough for me. And in the last fourth, like things got better, more exciting. I was actually, interested in knowing what happened, but like I didn't hate it, but it was just very meh. It was okay, and I gave it 2.5 stars. And finally, the last book I read was called Violet Made of Thorns, and it's the first book in a series of the same name, and that is fantasy. And we obviously follow Violet, who is the king's seer, and she is the king's seer because 7 years before the story starts, she saved the prince because she had a vision of him dying, and so she went there to the place from her vision and saved the prince, and the king just had her brought to the castle, I guess. I mean, it's a tower outside the castle, whatever. She was there. And before the previous seer died, which was already when Violet was there, she was saying a prophecy that whoever the prince fell in love would either be like their salvation or their ruin. And there was like a war coming, but then she died before really finishing the prophecy. And so now everyone is counting on Violet to figure things out. But the truth is, she is a better liar than a seer, and so she's kind of using both of her skills to try to keep people calm. But the prince is definitely not helping. And before I get into what I really think about it, like, I saw some bad reviews about this book, and I can definitely like understand everything that people are saying badly about it, but personally, I actually really liked it. And also, for once, I shipped the right couple. Who am I? I always ship the wrong people. There wasn't really much choice, so maybe that is why. But still, proud of myself. And also, I really like the main character. And again, I understand why people have issues with her, but I personally really like her. And I mean, I also had like some issues with this book. Like, it was definitely not perfect for me. But overall, I had a great time. It was like very entertaining. It was a little like too focused on the romance. And like I said, I'm not a romance reader. So, you know, it was a little too much there. I wanted more plot apart from the romance, but I still really enjoyed it. And it felt like a fairy tale. It had like a very fairy tale vibe, which I really enjoyed. It felt like very nostalgic, like especially the ending. And yeah, I really liked it. And like I said, very entertaining. And I definitely want to continue reading this series. And I gave this one 4 stars. And yeah, that was the last book I read. That was everything I read in November. And that is the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time. Bye!